Most of what I write in my sermons I get from the Bible. I am a believer, although I'm not one of those people that's always good at remembering exactly what verse I read in what book. I've had my face in the Bible my whole life, and my brain is good at putting it all together. Other than my memory issues, I am kind of a numbers guy. Some information I find in ancient Christian text, some information I find in ancient non-Christian text. Of course, there's always Google and other ways to search online. I also like to add a little common sense to the mix. Most of what I say are not my own theories, but just my interpretation or way of writing them. But these theories have been around for centuries, and this sermon combines all of the above. Remember from Sermon 1, to answer the question of who are we and why are we here, you have to believe in God. So let's first answer the question, who is God and where is God? Let's start with the where. God is in a space or a realm that we call heaven. Heaven is an endless space. If you can teach your mind to understand eternity, you can teach your mind to understand endless. No beginning, no end. Eternity and endless are synonyms to one another. Consciousness always has a location, and this is where God is. Who is God? God is everything. God is everything that has ever existed combined into one being. Anything and everything that you know that has ever existed is God condensed into one being. Every atom, cell, molecule, element, you name it, they're all God. Every thought, emotion, and feeling is God. Time and all of existence and creation is God. God is the Word, and the Word is God. Hence, God knows everything because God is everything, condensed into one single being, right? Okay, that's easy and logical to understand, so let's move on. God has existed eternally. God has been around forever. You have to grasp that. Christians use the phrase begotten, not made, to describe God's eternal existence. The word begotten, meaning in this text, always existing and not created. This is a correct definition of God. So why are we here? Surely God, who is everything that ever was and will be and needs nothing, didn't create us because God was lonely. That's what someone once told me when I was a child. I believe it was a Sunday school teacher, as the reason for our creation. But that's not true. That's silly. Or is it? This next line is a little complicated, so I'm going to read it off of my cheat board. There is a single aspect of all this to this single being that is everything that ever existed and ever will, that we call God, that God felt should endlessly grow and expand. Did you catch that? The hippies from the 60s and 70s had it right. Unfortunately, they were a little too high and people weren't listening to them or taking them serious enough. The one thing that God wanted to grow and expand eternally was an emotion. And the emotion is love. believe it or not, love is the whole and only reason for our existence, and that's where the hippies had it right. Jesus said, faith, hope, and love. The greatest of these is love. That's because faith and hope are earthly things, but love is eternal and the whole reason for our existence. So I have to ask, for what other reason would God, who is everything that is, was, and ever will be, need to create everything that we know, including us? So God formatted a plan, and the plan was to endlessly expand the emotion of love. God can create for God anything that God desires, including any emotion. Remember, God is everything. But for God to expand the emotion of love endlessly or eternally, including receiving love, then God cannot or can no longer be a single being or single entity. So hence Mrs. whatever her name was may have been correct. This is why of everything visible and tangible ever created, we were created last. Everything else had to be created first for this final piece of creation and existence, that is eternal love, to come to its eternal fruition. Whenever we decide to invent something or build something or just do something, we format a plan first. We do this to put in motion all the series of events that we know will have to take place in order to achieve our goal. In the general contracting business, we call this a blueprint. We also draw up a blueprint so we know how everything is going to look as we progress with our plan. So before we start our construction project, we know exactly what we need to complete our construction project, exactly what we need to do to complete our construction project, and exactly what our project will look like from start to finish. This is exactly what God did. Now with God's plan complete, that is the completion of God's blueprint, this is technically the beginning of our creation. Most of us have a 3-word name, a first, middle, and last name. And God's first, middle, and last name is God the Creator. God the Creator. God the Creator drew up a blueprint to create eternal, true love for God. So what is the very first thing in God's plan that God the Creator created to get things started? The answer is the very first thing God the Creator created to get it all started is what we call the angels. They also get 3 names. Their 3 names at this point are cognitive thinking souls. Angels are cognitive thinking souls. We don't know how many of these cognitive thinking souls that we call angels that God created, but we know He created them all at once, and there were very, very many of them. The angelic souls were not placed in biological bodies like ours, but rather they were created in spiritual form. Are angels male and female? Well, that's kind of not relevant at this point, and I'm not going to tap on that subject, but I promise I will get to that in a later sermon. To make things less complicated throughout this sermon, I'm just going to go back to calling these cognitive thinking souls by their nickname, angels. What do we know about this angelic population besides their very, very large population? First of all, in spite of what many have come to believe, they were not all created perfect by our definition of the word perfect. They were all given the ability to think, reason, and decide for themselves, just like we were given. So why didn't God just create a lot of perfect souls that all loved Him and each other eternally? Well, because unfortunately it's not that simple. But this all will be explained. God's plan is for eternal, true love. The ultimate goal for all of creation is eternal, true love. This is the final piece of creation and existence for eternity. And God planned the perfect way to accomplish that. Love is the one eternal thing that had to grow or evolve into true love for eternity. And I will loosely say that that's what triggered the creation and evolution of everything else physical that we see and know. Real true love is the completion of both existence and eternity, and God, who has always existed, knows exactly how to achieve this final step.